This is Movers and Shakers, where we interview the upcoming generation of Make It Happen multifamily investors to share their story.
Welcome to the Movers and Shakers podcast. My name is Gino Barbaro, co-founder of Jake and Gino, multifamily investor, educator, father, mentor, and I am joined by my co-host, the fresh-looking Joshua Ryan Rusin, the community director, Jake and Gino. Josh, how are you doing today?
Gino, doing well, my friend. You know what I'm excited for? We're getting back to the events. We had a virtual boot camp last weekend, and our team absolutely brought the pain. It was amazing. I missed seeing people. And then we had a money mixer, the July 11th. So that was a lot of fun as well. I missed the face-to-face interaction, and it's tough to beat that in-person networking as well. Gino, what are you excited about? What's going on in your world?
Well, I'm excited about today's guest because today's guest joined Jake and Gino about a year ago, and he closed his first deal within 3 months. And that was exciting because he's from Jersey, out of market. All those limiting beliefs were crushed, and that was just an excellent story. So, Josh, I want you to introduce today's guest.
Today's guest is Jason Bass. So he's currently residing in New Jersey with his wife and daughter, and is actually expecting his second kid in October. He's been employed in the power industry for the last 12 years and is currently working as the operations and maintenance manager at a power plant outside of New York City. Jason joined the Jake and Gino community after the passing of a family member changed his outlook on finances and life. He became a member of the community in April of 2019 and has since closed on 2 deals totaling 32 units with his partner in the last 11 months. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks, Gino. Josh, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me on.
So, Jason, I want to jump into that story of what changed in your mind when your family member passed away.
I think so my father passed away in December of 2018. And after he passed away, he had just retired the year prior. So he was 64. He ended up retiring from he had his own scale business. He retired from that. And then within 8 months after that, he ended up getting diagnosed with a rare form of cancer and passing away 8 or 9 months after that. So my outlook on life was changed because he worked his entire life to get to that moment of retirement where everyone says, like, these are going to be your golden years from 65 to, however long you live after that. And I felt that really is not what I want to do with my life. I don't want to work for the next 30 years and then be snuffed out right at the end for all my hard work and, have no time to enjoy it, 65 and on. So my goal has changed to try and retire in the next 5 to 7 years from my current job. And I think the best way to do that is through real estate investment.
So how did you find the Jake and Gino community? I mean, what were you looking for? Were you looking for single families? Were you looking for multifamilies? What attracted you to the multifamily space?
So originally, so my wife and I sold our house in October of 2017. So we had purchased our house right before we got married for $240,000. We invested about $60,000. We ended up selling it, making a profit of just over $100,000. And at that point, we were looking for somewhere else to live. So we ended up purchasing my in-laws' house, but we wanted to do a renovation. And I was, we could do it with the money that we had. It wasn't gonna be a big deal, but then that would be everything we had. We'd have nothing left. So then we would just be working to, live in a house. Couldn't do vacations, couldn't, go out to eat. It would just be very tight. So I started looking around for ways to invest that money and came across Bigger Pockets, started listening to podcasts, listened to the first podcast with you and Jake, where you guys are out buying multifamily properties. I think that same podcast, Jake was trying to cut down a tree right after it. So you guys are all ripping and ready to go for that. I just kept listening to the podcast and I ended up finding your podcast, started listening to that. And then I ended up setting up a call for, to find out what the Wheelbarrow Profits group was all about. The rest is history.
So what problems were you experiencing before joining Jake and Gino? Like, what were your limiting beliefs about multifamily and about real estate investing in general?
I think everyone kind of starts out the same way where they don't really know what they want to do, right? So you can hop on LoopNet or Crexy and you can look at student housing or multifamily or self-storage, and there's no real clear path forward. There's no real goal, right? You're just like, oh, I just need to make money and I'm going to do it, by investing in real estate. So it's, for a little bit, we were looking at student housing in New Brunswick, Rutgers University is right there. So it's, it's a pretty good area to invest. but like, I didn't really know anything about it. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. My biggest fear was making a mistake and costing, 30,000-40,000 bucks. And then, half of the money that we had saved is now gone, and I got to start all over. So finding a group that was going to be able to limit my mistakes was high priority.
And so I should have asked you this before. What did your family say when you're like, I'm going into multifamily?
Well, originally I'd only discussed it really with my wife, because I think
Good idea.
When people don't understand it, their first reaction is always no. The confused mind always says no. So, I discussed it with my wife, and she was on board. And, in the beginning, like when you're just looking at stuff and you're always talking about it, like until you take action, people don't really take you seriously, right? It's always, it's the next shiny object. And, she was supportive of it, and I talked to her about it a few times. I went down and visited one of the markets. When I started doing that, I think she started to believe a little bit more, like, all right, this, he's really going to take the next step. He's really into it. It's not going to be like a flash in the pan type of thing.
And what I like about your story, Jason, is you have something to back it up. It's not like you just came from a whim and said, hey, I want a shiny object. I want everyone to really write this down and to think about it. What is your why? Reasons reap rewards. Jason had enough reasons, the biggest one being not to live an unfulfilling life, retire, and then not be able to enjoy his retirement. That's a really powerful reason, and that's one of the reasons why I got into multifamily. Now, let's talk about once you join the community, you close a deal within 3 months. I mean, you even shocked me at how quickly you did it, coming from, I don't want to call you a newbie, but really not knowing that much, to all of a sudden 3 months, signing the dotted line, have a partner. You picked an amazing market. What did you learn through the community, and even the community members?
I think remember the first call we had, and kind of broke down like what I should be looking for. We broke down the checklist and kind of started going through markets. And then I got set up with Chris Jackson, who's been great from the beginning. We talked about different markets. I ended up picking Augusta, Georgia as the market I was going to go into. And there's a lot of good things that are going on there. The problem with that market is that there's really very limited inventory. Nothing really pops up. You really have to try and work relationships with brokers, and even then it becomes difficult. But there was a deal that was on the market I ended up finding it on realtor.com. It was 16 units. It was on the market originally 3 years prior, started out at $1.05 million. And it just sat there and sat there and sat there. And I ended up calling the broker and discussing it with them. They had an offer on the property already, and it ended up falling through. So the broker called me back and said, hey, listen, the deal fell through. This is the price that the owner wants. He's interested in, he would do some owner financing if it was required, but this is what he wants to get. This is the number. Let me know if you can do it. So I ended up flying down like a week after I talked to him, toward the property, toward the market, make sure I understood exactly what was going on. And every time I had a question, I was able to bounce it off Chris, and he was able to say, hey, you're going in the wrong direction. Stay in this lane. You need to ask X, Y, and Z, and keep going. And every time I got to a point where I hit a roadblock, I'd be able to talk to him, and he would say, don't give up. This is what you need to do. He, say X, Y, and Z to the banker, for instance, like for the bank, right? So the problem I ran into was that no one really wanted to loan to a person that was out of state.
Yes.
And they did want to loan. It would be some like ridiculous terms. It was like 15-year amortization with like a 6% interest rate. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. There's no way that I'm going to be able to buy the property with that type of financing. So, I ended up just kept calling and kept calling and kept calling. I probably called like 15 different banks in the area. And eventually I found one SRP that was interested in, financing the property. They gave me really good terms. So they ended up giving me a 25-year AM, 5-year term at 4.77% during, looking at 2019, that was a pretty good rate at that point. So we ended up setting the financing there. But then my problem was I didn't have enough money to close the deal. I ended up negotiating owner financing 10%, but I still was short money. And I was talking to Chris, and I'm like, dude, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have the money right now. I got to figure out something else. And he was like, hey, next time you go somewhere, the first person you talk to, tell them when they ask you what you're doing, you say, hey, I'm looking at buying some properties. I just toured a market, and it'll start a conversation. And that day I went to go to the chiropractor, and the chiropractor asked me what I was doing. I said the exact line he told me to say. And next thing you know, at the end of the appointment, he was like, listen, if you need money, let me know how much you need, and I'll partner with you on the deal. And that is my current partner that closed the first deal, and we just closed another property in Charleston.
Wow.
And if I didn't have Chris pushing me and telling me, giving me different advice on what to do, I probably would not have closed that deal. I probably would have just gave up because, when things get tough, people get discouraged. And he was able to just keep me going.
I love that. So there's a couple things. I remember getting on the phone with you a couple times. You texting me about the deal. Is around a $700,000 price point, discussing owner financing, all the different ramifications, pushing you to go to the multiple banks and saying, no, that's not what it is. I mean, if you go out there and you look, and I mean, I remember a lot of the text communications coming through. And I think everyone out there, we often underestimate the accountability piece when it comes to real estate. It's not just a few training videos. It's really somebody being in your corner and them going through the same process that you're going through. And you're like, oh, I can't watch a YouTube video on that because I need the answer today. I never thought about telling people that this is what I do. Thanks, Chris. The 10% owner financing, never really didn't know what owner financing was. How does that work? So all of those pieces worked really, really, really well in this deal. Why did you choose Augusta, Georgia? Because I know you probably shared that with Chris also, and you shared it with me, and we were surprised at how well the numbers on that market were.
Yeah, so Augusta, Georgia, I think the biggest thing I'm known for is the Masters tournament, which is a big driver of the economy. But there's also a military base there called Fort Gordon, and it was in 2013 or 2014. The U.S. Army moved their cyber command from Maryland down into Augusta, and they were investing $1 billion into the fort.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but then the city of Augusta, they built along the Savannah River, they built a $100 million cyber center. They do an annual conference for cybersecurity. And, just kind of looking at the global landscape going forward, cybersecurity is going to be a huge thing. It's basically going to be in everything between banking, military, power industry, finance. Cybersecurity will touch every single industry going forward. So what they're trying to do there is to create a, cybersecurity mecca for that industry. And, they're doing a pretty good job of it. The population growth is pretty good. The Augusta University is Augusta is the second largest city in Georgia. They have a great cancer center at the University of Augusta as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of good things going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some significant barriers to entry there. I mean, there's limited multifamily properties. They have some areas where there's limited construction. So Augusta in general, I think is a very good city. It should be booming in the next 5 to 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, that is not the only market I'm looking at, but it is one of the main markets.
So explain to me or describe to me the feeling that you had once you closed this deal. Was it like, I can't believe I closed it, or wow?
Yeah. So after the first deal, I ended up leaving the lawyer's office, and I was sitting in my car. I think it was in like a Lowe's parking lot. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, holy shit, man. I just bought an apartment building. Like, what am I doing here? So I ended up calling Chris, and I was just like, dude, man, I closed. The excitement that I felt was indescribable.
Mm-hmm.
I called my partner. We had a good conversation. And then, right after that, reality set in, and like, all right, well, now we need to start to turn this thing around.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the turnaround. Well, let's talk about the deal real quick. What did you like about the deal? Because I know it was a mom and pop seller. It was probably a mom and pop broker, and it was just one of those things where everybody, don't worry about getting on Realtor or LoopNet. If deals are sitting on there and they're stagnating for 2 or 3 years, they're overpriced, so they become motivated sellers. So at Jake and Gino, we teach the students, we teach our community, look for that mom and pop. There needs to be motivation in that, and also stay persistent, because that deal, just because it goes on the contract doesn't mean it's going to get closed. So Jason has done so many of the right things to get that first deal. So what did you like about that deal?
So one, there wasn't really anything else available in the Augusta MSA at that point,
Mm-hmm.
which one of the limiting factors. But so this guy had purchased the property from his brother-in-law probably 10 years prior. He had a 10-year plan apparently that was into year 11. So he just wanted to get rid of the property at that point. He wasn't interested in it. He didn't oversee it very well. I mean, the management company that was there prior, they weren't really doing a great job. So I ended up finding the original listing. It was when he purchased it from his brother-in-law, it was on LoopNet. So the original listing, the average rent there was $580. And when I ended up purchasing it, the average rent was still $580, 10 years later. So, I did a bunch of research on apartment buildings in the area. I created a spreadsheet trying to figure out comparing size to unit to type, and kind of figured out where we were going to fall within the rental range. So we were basically at that point, we would be able to rent the units for $695, and the average rent was basically $580. So there was $115 of upside rental potential there, and it wasn't really. We didn't really have to do a crazy amount of work. We put about $50,000 into the property, and the majority of that was exterior cleanup. I mean, they had a landscaper that was going there monthly, but if you went there and looked, it looked like there was nobody there for years. There was just piles of leaves everywhere. So we did a good cleaning of, we did tree trimming, clean up the property, and it looks, night and day from what it was. So just seeing the potential that there was mismanagement right off the bat, being able to put in, some CapEx, clean up some of the deferred maintenance was another key. And then, when I originally talked to him, we had discussed doing some owner financing. So he holds a note of 10%, so $75,000 at a 5% interest rate. It's an interest-only payment, so he's getting $312.50 every month until we refinance the property. So we ended up putting down another 15% or so on the property. So our payment originally was, we had gotten a 25-year amortization, 5-year term, and a 4.77% interest rate, and then there was 18 months of interest only on the property as well.
All right.
So we ended up closing the property with roughly $125,000 out of pocket. So I mean, for what we're making there monthly, the return is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 11% cash on cash at this point.
That's awesome. And what is your plan to do? Are you planning to refi the deal out, pay off the note, and just continue to cash flow?
So we were looking originally to refinance the property just before COVID hit. And then COVID hit and kind of threw everything in a tailspin. So when I was talking to the bank that we use, we had discussed refinancing. He was like, listen, right now is not really a great time to refinance. He's like, what I could do for you is for $500, we could just do a rate swap. We'll take you from 4.77% down to 3.31%.
Oh, right.
I was like, all right, for $500, we'll do that, because the first month we're saving $700 just in interest.
Yes.
Everything else stays the same. The remaining IO will burn off. There's no prepayment penalty. So, I mean, at that point I was like, yeah, we'll do that. That's a winner for me.
Wow. That is awesome. So this next deal that you have, how did you find this next deal? Where did you get the financing for it, and what did you like about it?
So the other aspect of the Jake and Gino, which is good, is the accountability pod. So this deal I ended up getting from a broker who I was introduced from somebody that's in. So Alan Z is a member of our accountability pod. He ended up calling me giving me this guy's information for a different property that he was working on. So I initially talked to the guy. We made a couple offers on different properties, didn't get anything, and then right when COVID hit, he had this 16 unit in North Charleston that was under contract by somebody else. They had it under contract for $805. And he came and said, hey, I have this property here. These guys just are going to walk away from it. Are you interested in making an offer? Here's all the information. So I was like, all right, let me take a look and I'll see what we can do. So we ended up making an offer at $700,000. The owner accepted it. This is the same thing, right? So this gentleman and his brother inherited the property from an aunt. They're absentee owners. They don't pay attention to it. The property manager's been there for 16 years. And, I could send you some pictures of it, but I mean, there's toilets outside, there's trash outside. I mean,
I love that.
it was
That's my
just
kind
a
of property.
disaster. Yeah, it was just a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So, we made an offer. They accepted it at 700,000. We did our initial inspection. We found a bunch of things that weren't portrayed to us in the beginning. They had said that one of the buildings needed a roof. We were okay with that. But our initial CapEx budget went from 100 to roughly 300 grand because there was so much deferred maintenance that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up, I ended up having a call with Chris and saying, hey, listen, man, I have a list of $50,000 of deferred maintenance that I want these guys to pay for. Can you give me some tips on negotiating? He gave me some of his quick hitters. I ended up having a phone call with the owners, and we ended up getting a price reduction of $40,000. We ended up purchasing it at $660,000. The bank is going to fund the full amount of CapEx, so the full $300,000.
Yes.
And we only had to put down 8%. So we only had to put down $60,000 to buy this property, because when it initially appraised, it appraised at 750 grand,
Mm-hmm.
and the bank was okay with us just getting down to the 20% from that number.
So this is another one of those deals, everybody. It's too good to be true. There's no deals out there. And that's, I know Josh is chomping at the bit, but before Josh says anything, what Jason is referring to in the accountability pod, we have accountability pods in the Jake and Gino community where we have a head leader of the pod. It's a mastermind group. And then we have other pod members. They're usually very small, between 4 and 5. They're really targeted for the students who really want to get that extra accountability, that extra touch point. You have your accountability coach, you have your deal expert coach, you have myself, you have the weekly lessons. This accountability pod is, okay, let's get on every 2 weeks or once a month, however it is, and we hold each other accountable in these accountability pods. Jason, are you looking at deals? How many deals did you look at? How many deals did you underwrite? How many brokers did you call? Have you done your homework? Do you need any resources, sharing resources, and just getting on, even during this COVID times where you're a little depressed sometimes. You get some bad news, but then all of a sudden you get on with Alan Z. Big shout out to Alan Z, by the way. And you're pumped, right? You get off the call and you feel like doing work. You're not feeling, oh, there's no deals out there. Or you know what? Someone sends you a deal. Or if you're looking to raise capital, one of the members in there may know people who have that access to that capital. So the accountability pod is exciting to me because I started with 1 year ago. I wholeheartedly believe in it because I want to get on the call with people who are as excited as I am, who are trying to do the same things for me. So big shout out to Alan Z. Josh, what you got, Josh?
All right, Jason. So here's what I want to know. I can guarantee there are a lot of listeners that were very similar to you early 2019, right? You work a lot of hours. Your backyard is not the best spot to invest, and you don't have millions of dollars like many in your banking account. So if you could go back into yourself or people that are in that position to where you were early 2019, what advice or pieces of advice would you give to those people?
I think that you have to get clarity on what it is your actual goal, your end goal is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether it's leaving your job or making enough money to put your kids through college on the side, whatever you want your goal to be, it needs to be very crystal clear, because if it's not, then you kind of start to sway off and start going in different directions. And, you may still be able to get there at the end, but you need to kind of, write it down, figure out exactly what it is you want to do, and then start to build your path forward to get there. I think originally when I had started, I knew what I wanted to do. I want to become financially free, but I just didn't really know how I was going to do it. And I was kind of just all over the place. And when you start doing that, you lose track of your goal, or you can lose track of your goal.
Mm-hmm.
And, it can take you double the time, or you may just give up and quit because no one's really taking you seriously because you're not really focused enough.
Josh, I want everyone to go back and listen to what Jason said, because that is the key to success in multifamily, in any endeavor. If you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it, you're never going to figure out how to do it. That's really, really important. And that's, for me, when I first started out, all I wanted to do is make a couple $1,000 so I could pay for my kids' college. And I was playing small ball. Why do I need to play small ball? Why does Jason need to play small ball? In 5 to 7 years, if Jason does one deal a year for the next 5 years, he's going to hit that mark. But I know that now the momentum that he's built and the relationships that he's created and the education that he's got, I mean, he's speaking as if he's a multifamily professional, an investor. He's identifying as one right now. He's talking about cap rates. He's talking about barriers to entry. He's talking about repair credits. He's talking about negotiation. All these things you learn during the journey, and he's just done it a lot quicker because he's really, really locked in and he knows his goals. So those are all important metrics, Josh. What else you got, Josh?
I love it. No, I think those are really great. And actually, I'm going to give you guys a powerful example that illustrates why a why is so powerful. So, all right, Jason, I'm going to give you an example here. So let's say I have a balance beam, and let's say it's 6 inches off the ground, and let's say it's a 4-foot balance beam. Would you walk across that balance beam for $1,000?
Yes.
Okay, now let's take that same balance beam and let's put it on a New York City high rise, right? We're 90 stories up. Still it's 4 feet. Would you walk across 2 buildings for that same $1,000?
No.
Okay, now watch this.
It's not going to work for me.
Yeah, so let's say your family is in the other building on the other side of that high rise, 90 stories up, and that building is burning down. Would you walk across that balance beam to save them?
Yeah, you'd have to. There's no way you let them go like that.
So the only thing that's changed in that example is why you're doing what you're doing. So when you have a strong enough why, that persistence will overcome any resistance or any hurdles that you hit in the road. And I agree with you 100% on everything you said on that, right? Having the clear and defined goals of what that looks like. And then also figuring out the vehicle that you're going to get to use that or to hit those goals. And also, I think you did a really good job of illustrating there are 2 ways to learn this business, right? The school of applied knowledge or the school of hard knocks. And as you pointed out, the school of hard knocks, it can cost you a lot of lumps and bruises, right? It's much cheaper to learn through someone else's mistakes, right? And finding the right person to learn from. So I think there's a lot in there. Before we cut to a break, anything to add to that, Jason?
No, I mean, I think that what else is important is to always continue to make, whether it's small pieces of action every day, but constantly building on your education. So I would compare it to like planning a trip, right? If you could read a million books on real estate, but if you never take action and you never put any of your knowledge into play, you're going to be in the same spot. You're never going to leave. You're never going to leave your driveway. You're always just going to be sitting there. Mm-hmm. At some point, you need to throw the car and drive and just take off and go.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. And Josh, if you were in that burning building and I had to walk over that balance beam, bro, I would fly and grab you, bro. I would not let you go down. So my boy's coming. You know what I'm saying? If I gotta have to plunge 90 stories to try to save your ass, bro, I'm in all the time, 100%. So won't let you go. Everybody, before we go to the break, we'll take a quick break, but just let me leave you with this before the break. If it makes you money, it costs you nothing. Just remember about that. You're not choosing to spend money in your education. You're investing in your education. And that's the difference. And that's the reason why Jason's so successful. So let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsors.
Gino, I know a lot of our listeners are wanting to take their multifamily investing business to the next level. I know that you've been hard at work helping Jake and Gino students do just that using our framework. Can you explain to the listeners how they can get our help?
Guys, we've been hard at work growing our community of like-minded investors, and the results of our members has been nothing short of incredible. We're looking to grow this amazing group. What we're looking for is those who want to follow our proprietary framework that we've created. Buy right, manage right, and finance right. Leverage our connections, education, and mentorship as ways to take your business to the next level.
So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become a part of our amazing community, apply to work with us at jakeandgino.com/apply.
All right, Jason, I got some short answer questions here for you. What's your favorite book you've ever read and why?
So my favorite, well, there's a couple, but my favorite book would be Band of Brothers by Stephen Ambrose. So it's a book about a company in the 101st Airborne during World War II, basically taking them from their day-to-day lives, getting thrown into training camp, and then jumping into Normandy and trying to survive through, the end of World War II. As far as business goes, I just read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And I think that book really puts life into perspective, right? So when you're sitting here, if I'm sitting here and I'm having a problem, with a real estate deal or something small in my life, you can go back and look at those guys that, put up the ultimate sacrifice and had to be under extreme stressful conditions, being shot at or, having bombs blown up, like you put that in perspective in your daily life, like your problems really aren't that big, and that you can break those down and tackle anything just by realizing what other people have sacrificed in their lives.
So that Band of Brothers is on HBO too. I saw the movie, and it's ironic that now millennials and young kids are too scared. They don't want to learn about World War II. Meanwhile, our ancestors actually fought there and got blown up at the Battle of Bastogne and all those other places, freezing in the wintertime and not knowing when the next meal is coming. And nowadays, we're afraid to even relive the past, which is pathetic. And that book by Jocko Willem, like the two words you need to remember is prioritize and execute. And that's what Jason did. He prioritized his goals, his skills, and he prioritized the market. Then he went down and he prioritized how to create the capital, and then he executed. So well done, bro.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. All right. What about your best habit for success?
So I'm a bit of a procrastinator, but I think the best habit is to continually to make progress, whether it's, setting aside time to read a chapter in a book every day, trying to underwrite a deal or two a week, making consistent and constant action towards your goal is one of the habits I think is best suited.
Love it. All right. So there's been some really good golden nuggets in this episode. Gino, I know you got a bunch for us. Let's hear what you got.
So 2017, Jason decides to sell his house with his wife. They make $100,000. They're thinking about buying another house. And if they do, they're going to sink all that money into it. They're not going to have any money left over. Unfortunately, his father-in-law passes away, I guess around a year and a half ago, and that's when his mindset completely changes. He doesn't want to have the retirement 30 years, what he's been taught. And that's a fundamental change, everybody. All of a sudden, reasons reap rewards. That's what ends up happening. And he goes out and he joins the Jake and Gino community in April of 2019. Struggles a little bit in the very beginning because of all the limiting beliefs that we all have. You can't invest in the market. I don't have enough capital. But he partners up with Chris Jackson. Big shout out to Chris Jackson, who's an amazing coach, an amazing investor, and as Josh likes to say, an amazing human being. And he's just a great role model. He's a great person to bounce ideas off of and to really help you out because he's been down the road, right? When you've been down it, success leaves clues, and Chris has been down that road, and he helped Jason pull off his first deal in 3 months, a 16-unit deal. The biggest golden nugget, Josh, that I can give in this whole entire story is don't be afraid to ask and let people know what you do, right? And also that education times action equals results. There's been so many in this podcast talking about getting clarity also and knowing what your goals are and knowing that just continuous action and continually getting better and continually surrounding yourself with amazing people will end up getting you the amazing results. Josh, what you got?
All right, I got two quick lines that I thought were really impactful. One, Jason, when you said a confused mind says no, I thought that was really good. And then also you alluded to action separates the dreamers from the doers, right? When you were saying, hey, a lot of people talk about it, right? They want to lose weight. They want to create wealth, but they're not taking their actions. Don't say that. They're not congruent with it. So those are two things that really, really stood out to me. And then Jason, real quick, how can the listeners get a hold of you?
You could reach my cell phone. It's 908-296-5212, or you could shoot me an email at jasonbass9696@yahoo.com.
Boom. Well, Jason, listen, I want to thank you for being an amazing guest on the show and sharing your movers and shakers story. Now, guys, if you want to be the next movers and shakers guest, email me, josh@jakeandgino.com. And listen, if you love the show, please leave us a review. And until next time, let's make it a movers and shakers week. See you, everybody.
Thanks, Jason.